This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 6:07 at WPSL. Wednesday evening, it's time for the African American Scene, presented by Howard Insurance in Port St. Lucie and hosted by Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you here on a Wednesday night. Boy, I've had a heck of a week, I'll tell you, and it's only Wednesday, all right? Sunday night, I laid down, and all of a sudden, my doggone tooth was hurting and you know, if there's one of the things that's a terrible thing in this world is a toothache. And that tooth was whooping me. And so I got up the next day and I called my dentist and I said, oh, you got to get me in. So they did and gave me a prescription. I tried to go back in the office. I stayed about an hour and then I had to go. I just couldn't. I was so uncomfortable. Then today, I'm in the office, came in a little early trying to get some paperwork done. And my assistant left me a text message. She was at the doctor's office and they weren't going to let her go because she had a really high blood pressure. So now it's Wednesday. So I've had a up and down hurricane week in terms of this and that going on. So I didn't have a chance to gather. I did gather some stuff, and I was so late getting out of there because she wasn't there because I usually leave about 3:30. I left it all sitting on the desk. So tonight we're going to have a totally open mic night. What I would like, though, I'm going to throw this out. I think I tried this once before, and I didn't get many responses. If you are a conservative, please tell me what attracted you to being a conservative and why you are a conservative. If you're a Democrat, please tell me what made you decide to be a Democrat. And if you're an independent, you can tell me what drove you in that direction as well. And I will entertain those thoughts on 340-1590. That's 340-1590. So it's totally open tonight, so you can call up and talk about anything you want. I will tell you that today on Facebook, I saw them recirculating Eyes on the Prize series is coming out on YouTube. If you've never seen that, I would strongly encourage you to watch that. I had that on in the background while I was doing some work today, and I forgot really how effective a job they did in putting that together. Eyes on the Prize was basically a chronology of African Americans in America. And one of the things that I had forgotten, which jumped off the screen at me, was the mindset of the African Americans back there. They had been actually beaten up and beaten down so far till some of them accepted that that's the way it was supposed to be. And in some cases, one of the persons interviewed said that, I guess we think that's the way God wants it. And I know that just got Cliff crazy when I said that.
That's a bizarre Stockholm Syndrome type of a situation. You know?
Well, I think what one of the persons said who had an awakening said, if that's all you've ever known and you believe in God, then you almost get a sense that that is the way it's supposed to be. But, wow. And so the point to be made there is that people had been beat up and beaten down so much that their psyche was tremendously damaged. And that's part of what I try to and educate conservatives about, who say, "Oh, you dwell too much on that." Blah 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 blah. We're talking about the 50s. We're talking about 50 years ago. Emmett Till got killed in 1953 or 54. I was 3, 4 years old. I was a kid. In the back of my mind, I kind of remember that. But what I remember most was that picture they had in Jet magazine, where his face was mangled so badly from the beating. Do you remember that?
I was kind of young too.
Yeah, but later years they showed it in Ebony, and then they showed it in Jet. There, and I'm sure if you did a Google search, you could find pictures of Emmett Till, because at the time they did not want her to have an open casket, but she demanded that there be an open casket so people could see what they did to her son.
Emmett, what was his last name?
Till.
Till. Okay.
And he was beaten beyond recognition. He's one of the triggers for the civil rights movement, along with Rosa Parks, but Emmett Till was a trigger. And the other thing, they had the grandson of Emmett Till's uncle, I believe it was, and he said when they were interviewing him that he did not realize how courageous his grandfather was, who testified at the trial for those two guys that killed Emmett Till, until he was much older. His grandfather literally risked death, and after giving that testimony, he had to leave the area, and he was in Mississippi. He had to leave, never to return again. So, and those two guys, the grandfather, because the way the story goes, they came to his door, knocked on the door and said, "Do you have a kid here from Chicago?" And he said, "Yes, my nephews are visiting me, or his grandkids, they're visiting me." And the two guys took him, and the thing that he said, he was from Chicago, that set them off was, he said he had a white girlfriend. Well, that did it. And one guy said, "You will never see the light of day," after telling them that. And then they proceeded to pulverize it. If you ever see that picture, and I'm sure you can find it on Google, his face was beaten beyond recognition. But anyway, but like I said, one of the things that I found so interesting was the psyche of black people at that time. They had just been beat down so much that they thought that was just their station in life, to be treated that way. But one of the things that happened, and I'd heard this a long time ago, and this just revisited it in my mind, was they had a man on there who had been in the service. And he said, after being in Europe fighting in the war, and he came back to America, that was the first time when he began to realize the way he was being treated was not okay. But it took him going to Europe to fight for the country to realize that the treatment that he was receiving in America was not right. Now, I find that very interesting. The psyche of the people was that's the part. And that's the part I try to get my conservative friends to understand, because that psyche was in the 50s. And this is 2019. That was not that long ago. So when you say, get over it, forget about it, and I don't see why you're living in the past, well, that was 350 years of subjugation to that kind of being put down. And if you put down somebody, you ever listen to, here's the best way I can analogy I can use. If you ever listen to a woman who's been spousally abused, one of the ways that that becomes a reality is the spouse continually tells her she's nothing and that she can do nothing without him. And he continues on that voice of reason in her mind to tell her she's nothing, that she's ugly, and this and that. This is just a pattern, typical pattern. So after a while, I've heard people say, well, why did you put up with that? And then she tells this story about how the methodology that he used to subjugate her. So in essence, what happens is she begins to think she's unworthy. And so whatever he does to her, she begins to think that maybe that is what she deserves until she gets the wake-up call. Well, it's just kind of the same thing happened to slaves. You know, they received this horrific treatment, and it was over and over and over again until the point of where they kind of thought that's just kind of the way it is. Now, some of the older African Americans are going to get really mad at me for saying this, but I see it being from the North. Some of the older African Americans here in the South have had that mindset drilled into them. And I can see it in the way they respond to certain people. Whereas being from the North, not that the North was perfect, but you just weren't subjugated to that kind of thing. The discrimination we received in the North was much more shrewd and sneaky. You were, you thought that you had all these freedoms, but you really didn't. They just cordoned you off in areas where you could go and where you couldn't go. But interesting. So if you want to see that, you know, look it up. I guess they just re-released it. I had it on a video tape, and I made it when Trevor was a little kid, and I recorded the whole series on PBS. But I started looking at some of it today just to refresh my memory about some of the topics they covered, and it was really quite interesting completely. Now, the other thing, Amber Geiger was convicted of shooting that man in Dallas, Botham Jean, and given a 10-year sentence. I think, I hate to say this, that is disgraceful. That's disgraceful. She killed that man in cold blood and got 10 years. Just ridiculous, ridiculous. And with the idea that she thought she was going in her apartment and she was going in his apartment, so she thought it was an intruder, and she killed him. And the information says he was sitting on his couch eating ice cream. Now, let me tell you why that is so offensive to me. There's people in jail right now for smoking marijuana for more sentencing time than this woman who just killed and murdered a guy who was a CPA, a good, solid, tax-paying citizen, and she got 10 years. Sorry. And I am not anti-cop. So don't call up here and say I'm anti-cop, because one of my son's best friends, who is like a son to me, I encouraged him to join the police force, and he's a member of the Port St. Lucie Police Force, and at my encouraging too. So don't call up here and tell me I'm anti-police, because I'm not. That's just ridiculous, because there's only one way, and I'm going to tell you this, and some of you are going to call up and get on me about this too. and that's 340-1590. There's only one way you're going to stop this bad police behavior. They have to do time. They have to be punished. If they are not punished, and they can come up with this cockamamie excuse of they felt, the standard line is, I felt my life was in danger. That's the standard line. And
But she thought he was going to attack her with the ice cream?
I don't know. It's like, really? Like,
how she justified a weapon or something to make that decision, you know?
well, she had her uniform on. She's a police officer.
That would have been enough for me to know that it was an officer.
Yeah, but one of the ladies said that I heard today, she said, if that had been me, I think the first thing I'd have did was I would have turned around and left, you know, and sought to get some support for the situation. So, as opposed to pulling out a gun and killing him. Listen, I'm sure there is some thoughts in your mind, and nobody knows exactly what you would do unless you were in that situation. But I would dare say that I'm sorry, 10 years is just not enough for killing someone. It's just not enough. I'd feel differently maybe if there was not so many unjustifiable sentences for people doing little minor crimes and people getting 25 years. I know I saw where a guy got 25 years for a couple of joints. Boy, that's ridiculous. You know, and you heard me talk about the guy when I looked at the Lester Holt story from the prison. He actually spent 2 days in prison. Guy got 150 years for selling drugs. Not hurting anybody, not injuring anybody. He got 150 years. He finally got out after 20 years because he had some legal advocates. But can you imagine 150 years for selling drugs? Sorry, that punishment far exceeds the crime. That's for sure. So, all right. So again, if you're a conservative, please call up and tell me, what is it that made you decide to become a conservative? And if you're a Democrat, please call up and tell me what it was that made you become a Democrat. And if you are independent, you can tell me that too. I'd be interested in listening to that. So, all right, so we're going to take a little bit of a break here. And again, that number is 340-1590. I want to hear from you. I'm trying to understand some of these differences we have, and maybe if I understand where they come from, we can find a way to fix them. Don't touch that dial, because we'll be right back with the African American Scene.
Serving the entire Treasure Coast, Howard Insurance and Associates in Port St. Lucie offers a wide variety of insurance products, along with the very best customer service. Whether you're shopping for the best homeowners coverage at the most affordable value, contact Rudy Howard's team at Howard Insurance and Associates. If you need coverage for your vehicle, call Howard Insurance and Associates, 343-9878. That's 343-9878. Maybe you're planning to add a boat, motorcycle, or RV. Call Howard Insurance and Associates for your free quote at 343-9878 and get the coverage you need at a cost that will fit your budget. For home or business, auto or recreational vehicle, choose Howard Insurance and Associates, 600 Southwest Darwin Boulevard, Suite 206, Port St. Lucie. And for your free rate quote, call them at 343-9878, 343-9878.
Business is sales and services, good products, fair prices, and customer consideration. That's Seacoast Air Conditioning. Family owned and operated and serving the Treasure Coast for over 36 years. At Seacoast AC, they have 3 basic fundamentals: answer the phone, show up on time, and fix the problem right the first time. That's the Seacoast way. Online at seacoastair.com. You may not need an AC company today, but when you do, call Seacoast Air Conditioning. Waiting to answer your call 24/7.
Comfort crisis? Don't roast. Call Seacoast.
WPSL features a twin bill with Virginia Tech visiting the Hurricanes at 3:30, followed by Michigan State and Ohio State at 7. The Gators host the Auburn Tigers at 3:30 p.m. on WSTU. Over air and streaming live worldwide on Alexa and Google Home. College Football 2019 is brought to you by the Sneaky Tiki of Stewart, the Quit Doc Foundation of Martin County, Indian River State College Athletics, Nice Air, the St. Lucie Draft House, Hoskins Turkle, Lloyd & Lloyd, and Seacoast Air Conditioning.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
We now return to the African American scene with Rudy Howard.
And we have Bob on line 1. Yes, sir.
Hey, Rudy, how you doing?
Okay.
You asked why I registered the way I did. Well, I started out, when I first registered to vote, I started out as a Democrat, basically because I couldn't stomach Nixon, and I didn't know you could be an independent, which my mom was. So I became a Democrat. I stayed a Democrat until 2008, when the Florida primary was held earlier than they wanted it scheduled, and Hillary's some of Hillary's votes were taken from her. I didn't think that was fair, so I became an independent, and have been an independent since.
Okay. So are you saying that Obama cheated?
Pardon?
Are you saying Obama cheated?
I don't know if he cheated or not. I can't say one way or the other. But, I mean, I think Obama would have gotten the nomination, but I still didn't think it was fair that the delegates were taken from Hillary. So I became an independent.
Okay. So are you still comfortable with being an independent, or do you lean left or right, or in the middle, or?
I am left of center, let's say. There are some things where I'm to the right, some issues where I'm to the left, but in general, I lean left.
Okay.
The only thing I don't like about being an independent is you can't vote in the primary.
Which is tragic. Yeah, I disagree with that. I forget there's about 2 or 3 states that don't have that, where in a primary you can vote whether you are with a party or you're with an independent. And I can't remember the states off the top of my head, but I think that is the proper thing to do. But,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for your opinion. I appreciate that input.
Okay, thanks much.
Okay, all righty. So, so there you go. There's an independent. I had a brief stint as an independent many years ago. Before I came to Florida, I went through an independent time where I just felt as though I just wanted to not feel as though I was wed to any party in particular. So that was that position there. But I eventually came back to the Democratic Party, and now I am firmly entrenched in the Democratic Party because I just can't handle this behavior of our current president, which just truly offends me in every aspect. I think the guy is just offensive. And not to mention the fact that I hate to say this, it pains me to say it, but he's just a pathological liar. To me, the man is incapable of telling the truth. And Steve, yes, sir.
Hey, Rudy.
Yes.
You know I'm a Democrat, don't you?
You're not a Democrat. Don't tell
Oh,
me that.
yes, I am. I'm a Democrat.
Well, you say that, but I don't believe you.
I'm a conservative.
You're
the reason I was a Democrat.
But you're not a Democrat now.
I'm still a Democrat.
No, you're not a Democrat.
Yes, I am. Don't tell me what I am. I am, Dan. I'll show you my card if you want me to bring it to you.
Okay.
I was a Democrat. I went to the Democratic because the Democrat and most southern towns has been the biggest party. Actually, still is the biggest party. So when you have a primary, if you want to vote in a primary, you always have a choice between picking the best Democrat that you think of the two. Then when you get to the general election, being that I'm a conservative, I could pick either the Democrat or I could pick the Republican. And the reason is if we have more than a two-party system, everybody needs to be in one party or the other, or you run the risk of having 33 or 34% winning election by the most votes, while that 35% rules over the others. So you need to have only two parties, or you're going to create more chaos.
Well, you just made a statement that really just doesn't make a lot of sense, so you're going to have to re-explain that.
Okay. If you have an independent run...
If you have 35% that wins an election, it's not because they got the most votes. It's because they got the most electoral votes.
Well, I am for the electoral vote because that should be. That's the way it should be.
No, it shouldn't.
Yes, it should. And
every election process from the time we're in kindergarten through high school, through college, everything is the majority of the vote, even our congressmen, senators, and governors, except for president.
Well, I'm telling you that the system is so that electoral votes give everybody an equal vote by the area and not being when you use the word democracy, it means that if I have the most votes, that I get to tell somebody else what to do. That's the majority rules, right?
That's right.
So, but that's neither here nor there. What I'm saying is, I agree with that system because I think it gives a rural vote just as much where taxpayer money should go than if I live in a city where I have all the people and I can vote all the money to my state or my city because I have more people. And that doesn't necessarily mean because I'm paying the taxes in for them. They're not paying the taxes for me because they vote my money to them. And that's a possibility. So that's why we're called a representative republic. So we have a voice. Otherwise, majority has a voice, and you have no voice.
Not true.
That's true.
No, it's not.
The majority rules in a democracy. If that's the true democracy.
Yes, I agree. But you know why that's not true? You get 2 senators. Every state gets 2 senators.
That's true.
Okay. You have a state like Montana who doesn't have as big a population as the city of New York, and they get 2 senators.
That's true.
And then you get a state...
But in the House of Representatives, what do they have?
Well, it goes by how many, what the population is in the districts. But I'm just saying. So the founders found one way to offset that by giving each state 2 senators, and it doesn't make sense. Although I can kind of live with that. I understand the wisdom of why they did that because since the Senate is a deliberative body, and oftentimes is the final say-so about many laws and rules.
Yes.
It gives even the small populated states some say-so. So, okay, I'm with that. But when it comes to the president, then you have situations like what we just had this last time. You had the president lost by 3 million votes. 2 days later, there was mass protests in the streets because he did not represent, those people protesting did not vote for him.
Now you're making my point about having more than one party and three parties where you would have the majority of the people ruled by the minority. So if you have a two-party system, and not Republican and Democrat, it would always be winning by the majority. Do you see my point?
Well,
Even if you didn't agree with a total representative of that, you would vote in a primary. You would have that. You could run. Anybody could run as president. I mean, if you look on the presidential ballot, there can be people that don't even have any party that run.
That's true.
Okay, so
and
so
some have done that.
Validate what we need to have instead of chaos, which you just gave the example that people felt that it was he was won by a majority.
He did not. He did not win by the majority. Okay.
I know. That's what I said.
Well, that's not what you said, but okay.
But if it was less for if it was more for the other group, they're still fighting the system. And the system, the majority system, is going to. That's not even the reason why I want to call. I'm a Democrat because I think that we need to be at a two-party system. I'm a conservative, not a liberal and progressive for a lot of reasons. Liberals and progressives, by the definition of the word, supposed to have liberal views, look above, look beyond, and things are changing. Progressives, everything is not good right now. It needs to progress to get better. Those are the kind of the two thoughts in the back of their mind. But a conservative thinks more along the lines, and actually, when you and I had one conversation, when I asked you, I said, just think for a moment and try to think the other side of a position and see why those people are thinking the way they're thinking. And I gave you an example. And the next week on the radio, you said, hey, Cliff, you know what he asked me to do? And we were talking about critical thinking. Liberals and progressives are not really critical thinkers.
Oh, I beg
They're
to differ with
confirmation bias thinkers.
I beg to differ with you on that.
Okay, you can, but let me make my point, and I'll make it with one issue. Let's talk about global warming right now, and just for exculpatory evidence is being denied all the time. People are being fed one side of an argument all the time. I'll ask you, how much of the atmosphere, what percentage of the atmosphere is made up of CO2?
Let's not go there.
Well, see, I would like to, because I have to ask the questions, and this is what I always try to do. If somebody has a stance and they cannot promote their stance with objective reasoning, then it's subjective. So I'll tell you what it is. It's 0.04% of our atmosphere is CO2. The next question would be, do you know what is the most that causes the most global warming? Do you know the answer to that?
We're not going to do that.
Okay, well, I will give you the answer then.
Okay.
The answer is water vapor. It causes 67% of the greenhouse gases.
Well, here's what I'm going to ask you.
Well, wait just a minute, because I want to finish. Those two things are very important evidence to consider. I've been to see the glaciers. I've stood with 100 yards of them, and the water is coming underneath.
Do you think the glaciers are melting?
They're melting, but I firsthand experience.
Well, let me ask you this.
Well, let me finish
Why?
my
No,
statement.
you're not. No, you're gonna let me. You're gonna let me say this right now. You can't control the show. I keep telling you that all the time. What I'm going to ask you is, why do a majority? Now, I'll admit there's a minority of scientists that do not feel we are responsible for global warming. Why do a majority of the scientists feel there's global warming?
Well, first, that's a loaded question because, first of all, the majority of the scientists is a big picture. Let me ask you this. It would be a better question. How much of the weather scientists, those that have studied weather, how many of them have that thought and they believe that it's true? And how many of those that study the weather, not scientists, because I can be a scientist and growing green grass over here or putting down asphalt and examine it. The scientific method is to study to know. And 97%, 97% of all water on the earth is in the ocean. 97%. 1.7% is in ice, snow, and glaciers. So the amount of water that's in glaciers is probably around 1.5%. There is no mathematics, because the ocean covers 70% of our surface of the earth, 71% actually, that 1.7% of some water is going to raise, as the first conference on weather said, that it was going to raise the ocean 200 feet. There's not enough water there to do that.
Well,
then they give the
Steve,
example.
You're arguing with the science, and what I'm not going to argue this with you because you've taken the conservative point of view that somehow there's some nefarious reasoning for why people are saying there's global warming. Just to let me just give you the benefit of the doubt and say, tell me what the nefarious reason is that people are saying there's global warming if there is none.
Okay, but what you're saying is you're accepting...
No, answer the question. If you don't think there's global warming, tell me what the nefarious reason is for claiming there's global warming when you think there is none.
Well, there's a lot of reasons. Because of the economy that they think that they can create. Because it's a feel-good science, because it's assumption science, because they don't know for sure. And if I feel like I'm doing, it's just like a religion. You can have an occult religion where people believe everything that they're saying, and have some emotional facts that they back their thoughts with. And basically that's what you're doing, because you have no way of testing what they're saying. You're just believing it blindly because that's what you want to believe, or that's what you would feel good believing.
No, that's not why I believe that.
Well, then tell me this. Tell me then why the numbers don't match of how it's going to raise the oceans. 1.7.
They're not counting the underground aquifers.
You're a mathematician. Tell me how 1.5% of the water in the glaciers, if it's going to melt, is going to raise the oceans.
Well, here's what I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to let you go because I got another caller that's called in. I can say, because I've seen the pictures on National Geographic of what glaciers looked like 10 years ago and what glaciers look like today. And there's no doubt whatsoever in my mind those glaciers are melting. And what I will also say is there's ample evidence to show that the Earth is getting warmer. Now, you can argue and say that it has nothing to do with global warming. That's your argument to make for yourself. But you can also, it's really difficult to say there is no such thing as global warming. But that's a conservative point of view.
That actually the degree that they're talking about and the results they're talking about, they don't match up.
Okay.
And
are you
I'll
a
give you an
scientist?
example.
Are you a scientist?
No.
Are you a scientist? Did you study science?
I'm not a scientist, but I know.
Did you major in science?
Say again?
Did you major in science?
Actually, I have a not an associate's degree. I didn't go on beyond 2 years of college, but that still doesn't change the facts.
I got to let you go. I got a call. Call back again. Greg on line 2. Yes, sir.
Hey, good evening, guys.
Yes.
I just heard Steve say the majority vote is neither here nor there. That's exactly what he said.
Basically, yes.
So then why in the heck are we voting? The Electoral College is a sham that's been put in place by both parties, Democratic and Republican, to rezone voting districts for their candidates to get more power and more vote possibilities in any region. The Electoral College needs to be eliminated. And we need to go back to the popular vote.
Look, Greg, it's like I told Steve, it is the only election in the country at every level that is done by Electoral College.
I heard that, and that was classic. That was so wonderful to hear, and he still refused to accept it.
Right? Yeah. You know, if you run,
well, you got my 50 cents worth. You know, the Electoral College is a sham, and but I will say this: both parties are guilty of gerrymandering.
I will agree with
and
that.
It needs to be stopped.
I agree with that, because they busted Maryland earlier this year for gerrymandering in Maryland for the Democratic Party. I'm not going to argue that.
Mm-hmm. But okay. Cliff, excuse me, isn't it interesting that it always happens prior to an election?
Oh yeah, well,
it doesn't happen in a non-election year.
Yeah. Well, what we have to do, you know, I love to give this example, you know, and I've talked about it before. Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia were best of friends. And you couldn't get two people that were more polar opposites in terms of political thoughts.
On the bench, that's right.
Okay, but you know why? And I've said this to many people. Because their discussions are based on a factual matter, not on personality, not on conjecture, not on conspiracy theory. So when you debated with Ruth or you debated with Antonin, you had to be able to speak factual information.
Absolutely.
So, but what we have now is people don't give a damn about facts. They just want to say, I make up stuff and say, well, this is it. Especially, and I was really shocked. I had a guy that I didn't know was a conservative talked to me the other day, and he says, yes, I am a conservative. I never told you that. I said, but I hate Fox News. It is the most prejudicial, biased channel on TV. And I went,
that's pretty accurate.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I said, I am really said, no, he said, I'm a conservative and I hate it because it's just ridiculous what they do. And I said, well, okay. So I thought to myself, there's hope. Because you know what? If we can sit down across the table from each other and eliminate the garbage and talk about subjects in a factual basis, we can get some things done.
You know why that's so difficult, Rudy? Because some people just don't want to accept the facts.
Yes.
And they want to twist it and deviate it in whatever way they can to make it politically beneficial for themselves.
Yes.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
We just, come on,
Yeah.
The majority doesn't matter. That was a classic.
I know. That was well, sometimes.
Thanks, you guys. I appreciate you taking my call.
Okay, Greg. Thank you for calling.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that, he picked up on that. And Steve likes to give you and I know what he does. He sits down, he goes through, and he gets all this factual percentage of this and percentage of that. And I haven't sat there to study that, but I'm certainly capable of looking at the same thing. and then wants to quiz me on, okay, what percentage is this? Well, I don't know. I could play the same game with him. I just choose not to. I could say,
Still a quantum physics question.
yeah, right, yeah. Well, what's that? That's called to try to stump me kind of thing. But anyway, but I thought that Greg was right on there, and he understand the point that I'm trying to make, that there is the only thing in this country is electoral colleges for president. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And part of the reason why there has been such a backlash to Trump, just one, not among many reasons, because he was not voted on by the majority. The majority didn't want him. Now, he rightfully, I'm going to say with quotation marks, he rightfully won the election, but he was not won by the majority. Now, and I'm going to give you something else here, because there's a lot of controversy about, and he's making all these arguments about people in his organization backstabbing him and undermining him and not being loyal to him. How in the heck you going to be loyal to that man? And he dumps you. He talks about you like a dog. You don't think, how is anybody, when you're a leader, and I've been a leader, and I had 90 people that worked for me. I had 3 assistant managers and 17 supervisors in New York City. If I treated my people the way he treats his people, my office would have collapsed. You have to be able to treat your people with respect. And if they need to be disciplined, you discipline them. But you treat them with respect. Like the way he did Jeff Sessions, and I'm not a Jeff Sessions fan, and I was not in favor of him becoming Attorney General. What he did was horrible. He humiliated that man constantly. Then what he did to his Homeland Security person. Then he wonders why people are not loyal to him. Who the heck wants to be loyal to him with the way he treats people? He trashed the FBI. He trashed the CIA. He trashed the Washington Post and the New York Times. And then he wants to call fake news because they're always on his behind. Well, you know what? People are normal. People, if you trash me, I think I want to get you back. So you trash me constantly. There's, no matter how objective I'm trying to be, there is going to be an element inside of me that says, I want to pay back. And then if you're on his staff, and I'm telling you, this is firsthand corporate experience. If you treat somebody like that, and you're on that staff, you'll be thinking in the back of your mind, when's he going to get me? When's he going to get me, Cliff?
I've worked for people like that before.
Yes. Yeah, you go, well, dang, look what he did to so-and-so. Look what he did to McMaster, and he did to Mattis. He did to Tillerson. And listen, even what he did with Comey, when he fired Comey, he wanted to leave him stranded in Vegas and not allow him to come back home on a government plane. Now, if you're in his organization and you watched all this stuff, you got to be saying to yourself, boy, I'd never turn my back on him because I'd be waiting for the knife to go sticking in my back. So when you guys, you can trash all you want the people around him, he has created that environment. He has created that environment. Didn't happen to Obama. Those people respected him. You may have hated him, but his people respected him. Even Bush, they both had some leaks, but not like what Trump has, because for the most part, Bush was respected. if you go out and you just dump on everybody and then you want to have respect, that doesn't make any sense. But anyway, we got one more caller trying to call in here at the last minute. Cliff's going to get this one in here real quick, whoever it is. But in any event, so give that some thought. So when you're mad about his people talking, just remember that he was creating his own headaches.
You have Daniel on line 1 with 3 minutes left in the show.
Okay, Daniel, we don't have much time, but what you got?
Well, Rudy, I just wanted to say that I think Trump is the best president that we've had in a mighty long time.
You do, huh?
I think he's accomplished a lot, even though he's been attacked right and left. The media is all against him. It's terrible. It's really terrible what they're doing to him.
Yeah? So you don't think Obama was attacked?
I think they're making up stuff on him. I know they are. And it's horrible what they're doing. Okay. I just can't stand it.
Okay. Well, you're entitled to your opinion. Can't take that from you.
I really think he is accomplishing a lot for all the trouble that he's got going on against him.
He's created his own headaches. I've said that, but that's what I was saying before. He has trashed everybody, and then he gets mad when people don't stand beside him.
Well, now, do you blame him for not for trashing Comey, who was against him from the beginning, and tried not to get him elected? They had a lot of crooked stuff going on there.
How could you say Comey tried to not get him elected when Comey, 10 days before the election, comes up with additional information about Hillary, which probably was the fatal blow to her candidacy? How was that?
They allowed they were trying to snipe on him. They were putting what do you call it? They were putting microphones in his office and bugging him.
There's no proof of that. They said that.
Yeah.
No, there's no proof of that. They said that he said that Obama did it, but there's
Rudy,
no proof.
Rudy, I tell you, it's all going to come out here in the next couple of weeks.
I'd like
with
to see
the
that.
Barr's report.
Okay, I'd like to see that.
Yeah, and okay. I think you need to give him more credit than what you've been doing.
Oh man, I can't stand him. I think he's the worst president in my lifetime, and ain't even close.
No,
in my opinion.
So much.
No, I think he's the worst president in my lifetime. Not even close.
I'm just a middle-class guy, and he's helping the middle class big time.
Okay. Well, look, call back next week.
Okay, Rudy.
And we can continue the discussion. But thank you for
calling. Sure will.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Folks, I'd like to thank you for listening to the African American Scene. God bless and be safe, and I will see you right here next Wednesday for the African American Scene.
The African American Scene, presented every Wednesday evening in the 6 o'clock hour by Howard Insurance in Port St. Lucie. Archives of this show can be seen on YouTube. Look for WPSL TV on YouTube and look for archives of the African American Scene with Rudy Howard. And if you're on one of these shows, you get to hear yourself call in on the YouTube video. This is WPSL Port St. Lucie. Celebrating over 25 years and counting, it's 7 o'clock right now.